liberty and justice for all. I would like you to remain standing just for a moment. I want to have a moment of silence for one of our alternates, Carol Hadley, who passed away. And she's one hard worker, a very dedicated person. And I think that's a little bit of respect we can pay for her, to her. And so just for a moment here, if we can have, in honor of her, some silence. Thank you. Thank you. The first order of business is approving the regular meeting of May 23rd first. Is there a motion to approve the advisory committee meetings of May 23rd?
I motion to approve those minutes.
Motion made by Amy. Now that's water. Motion made by Amy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Shirley. Pat. Okay. All those in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The minutes of May 23rd are approved. Also, we need to approve the minutes of August 27th, our regular meeting. Could I have a motion on that also? Has to come from the 5 members. Any of you? Okay, motion made. Is there a second?
Second it.
Second. Any discussion or objections? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. I'm sorry, no, I did not call roll. We have 2 alternates, I think, that are here. So let's do. I did not call roll. I just said we had a quorum, and I mentioned District 3 alternate. But as far as roll call, we are all representative. All districts are representative by either a member or an alternate. No one has snuck in and is posing as a member of the committee. So we do have a quorum. The first consent item is the election officer survey responses. And let's see. Who is scheduled to give a presentation on that?
Through the chair, it's a consent item, so there's not a presentation, but there is a packet in your materials of all of that information. And it will be posted to our website first thing tomorrow morning.
All right, thank you. We have some discussion items. Sorry we're moving through this too quickly for some of you perhaps, but we have an election officer experience on election day, a report from Deborah Collins. So Deborah, would you please step forward to the microphone?
Hello, I'm Debbie Collins, and this is my husband, Michael Collins. We were just gonna go over some notes of what we experienced. We were poll workers, election officers, at the Kennedy Community Center. Do you wanna just tell them a little bit, or?
Fire away.
Okay, well, I had written the letter, so I'm just gonna kind of go over that. We had 4 workers, 3 students. We worked, you say well together?
Yeah, it was actually a great crew.
Yeah, great crew. Field inspector was great, our inspector was great. We had the DOJ show up. You want to talk a little bit about DOJ?
Sure. DOJ showed up. We had two people. We had no idea they were coming, but I guess that was the way it would work. One of them was from California. The other was sent out from DC. They asked me a bunch of questions outside regarding everything, wanted me to explain each machine and where they were originated from, and all of a sudden, like, I'm just a worker here. But they did have quite a few questions, and then they moved forward to coming inside, and then they did some questioning. The only thing that was a little off from my standpoint was the gentleman from DC he was walking around the room talking to everybody. He did approach the students, who are all minors, and started speaking to them in Spanish. So I have no idea what was going on with that. That was a little strange, but for the most part, they sort of stayed out of the way. They were a little bit different, but they said that this is the only county they were asked to come to in California. And they were handling 3 sites, and there was like 12 of them sent out.
How long do you think they were there? I was thinking about.
They were there about an hour. They were there for 30, 40 minutes that everyone else saw. I was 25 minutes outside with them, so.
Yeah, they were in and out, kind of doing stuff. Some things that we had issues with, we did need more paper, which the field inspector had got it right away for us. No issues. We did need ink, which she actually brought ink to us, and I didn't know we were gonna need it. And she brought actually more than one. We actually had, one of the students was trying to put the ink in the machine, and unfortunately it exploded, so it went everywhere on the machine. Like my hands were completely ink. So we just took care of it. So I washed up, I saved the machine. The paper was good, so we just kept going. People in line, they were out the door at that point because they all came from another location that had printer issues. I don't know what the printer issues were.
I'm guessing ink.
It might have been ink. I don't know. What else, Mike? Everything else went fairly smooth. We did double checks on poll pads. So first poll pad, we couldn't find somebody. We always did a double check just to make sure. And a lot of times we found them. So could be user error on, I was at the first one, so that'd be me. But we found a lot of people that way. We did find new voters in the polling pads, so that was interesting.
And by that, we mean they came in and said they've never registered before.
Never
And they were
registered, never
registered.
voted.
That
But
was a little.
I still
different.
looked everybody up, just in case we could find them, and a lot of people we could find.
We did, real quick on that, we did have probably 30 or 40 people, it's kind of shocking, come to register that day.
Yeah, a
So-
lot of people.
I was shocked that there were that many.
Let's see. So the interesting, well, not interesting really, provisional voters and new voters, there's no way to verify that they've been there and voted, just like the polling pad would say their name, because you don't have an ID. So maybe if we could get something that has some sort of tracking, we could write their names down. Something has to be, we wouldn't know if somebody came back around. Not that they would, but maybe they would, I don't know. So that was kind of one thing. What was the other one, Mike? The scanners. We had some issues with scanning, and, putting it through a couple times to get it to go right. But we never checked to see if it was counting. So the scanner would have 2 pages. We weren't looking before they put them in and then after to see that. So that might be something that would be good, because we wouldn't know if the machine was counting them, and what the scanner does after they leave us, we don't know. And new voters too, that would be nice to have some sort of tracking when they're coming in, because they're filling the paperwork out and putting it in the box, but who are they? Like, can they come back around and do it again? They could.
And from our perspective, on the new voters or people going in and trying to make sure they are registered in the right place, one of the things that would really help out is, it takes a long time to get them through. And it kind of stops the whole process, and we had a line that was short, and then all of a sudden started growing all the way out the door, because we had a bunch, and it kind of stops everything. We had a room that was maybe half this size, so we couldn't let them in, so we're keeping people outside. They were all champions, nobody griped or moaned
We
about
had
it.
a great group of people. This
That was
area
fantastic,
has beautiful people. Yeah, it was
So,
great.
But that would
Everybody
be,
was.
that'd be a big help if there was maybe a registration side and maybe one person set for that.
Yeah, that takes a long time to fill everything out for new voters and provisional, and, the room got packed. What else do you remember are there any questions of anything we could answer?
Yeah, let me open up to, the alternates and the members of the, committee, advisory committee. So, anybody wanna ask question? You start on the right?
You said, oh, I'm sorry. I have such a big voice anyways. You said that, this was the first time they were asked to come here. Okay, who asked them?
Oh, the DOJ? We
Yeah.
don't know. They didn't tell
They
us
didn't
who
tell us.
requested them.
They said they were requested.
Do they just pull us out of a hat or?
Through the chair, would you like me to respond?
Yes.
So the DOJ contacted me before that news story hit. It's their actual poll worker program. It's interesting to me that they told you guys that they were asked to come out, because from what the DOJ attorney shared with me, and I have their contact information, is that we were randomly selected and that they came out just because it was routine, a part of their federal poll watcher program. That's what was said to me in the phone call. They came out, and then post-election, they did call us, and in tonight's presentation, I'm gonna give you a little information about what they shared with us on the phone call. There's not a written report, but they did call us to give us the information that they had, so.
Okay, yeah, they actually said they were.
No, that's so interesting.
Yeah,
And that we were the only county that
He was
requested them.
very aggressive
So I
about
don't
that.
know.
She was more down.
They were
okay,
both nice though.
But he was
They
a
were
little
nice.
bit more a matter of fact on that one.
You say he and she, excuse me, who is he and who is she? Who's the
He's,
feds and
he,
who's
and
the?
she, I don't know their names. I have no
No,
idea.
I meant,
They were
who was the
DOJ.
federal one and who was the?
They're
The-
both DOJ,
The
so-
female was, from
California.
California, and then
And he's from DC.
the man was from DC, but
Okay,
I
so I'm
don't
a
know
little
their
confused.
names.
We have federal DOJ and we have state DOJ.
Yes.
They're separate entities.
Okay.
And so who was the female? I'm just wondering.
She was from California. I
She
don't know
was
any
from
names.
California, they
Okay.
didn't give us their
All
names.
right, thank you.
Or if they did, I don't recall.
When you were saying you had all these issues on the printers and the scanners, is this new equipment that was getting broken into like a motorcycle? Gotta have 5,000 miles on it before it says it's good?
Yes, it's not the same equipment we used as the last one. So
Oh,
I'd say it's
okay.
all new.
I think they're different. Were they
Yeah.
different this year?
The same
I
machine
mean-
from the primary, yeah, it's
Oh,
it was
okay.
all the same from the primary. The
printer
printer
was-
was new, the very
Oh,
Printer was
printer
new,
was,
okay.
yeah.
Anybody else? Yes, Christian?
To the husband. So you saw one of the DOJ agents speak to the college students, right?
High school students.
High school students, okay. What demographic would you say they were? Just
They were Hispanic.
They were Hispanic, okay. When you conversed with them one-on-one or together or separately, right? Were they able to comprehend and understand American English when you?
They were
Oh, they spoke English.
absolutely
They spoke,
perfect.
okay, okay, all right.
They were perfectly bilingual. They spoke both languages wonderfully.
And so you said you found it kind of peculiar and odd when the agent started talking to them separately,
Yeah.
right? Meaning you weren't part of
I'm just not
that
fond of
conversation.
something- Yeah, especially.
And they went
with-
from
with-
English and they switched on to Spanish, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that he is an authority talking to minors, I felt a little uncomfortable with
Sure.
it, but that's me.
And he could have
Okay.
been just saying, how are you doing? We don't-
When they were done conversing with the agents, did you ask them or why?
We were too busy.
okay.
Otherwise I would have asked, but it was crazy,
It
actually.
was a busy
We had a
place.
very busy
which was
polling
good.
station compared to the last couple of years.
Thank you.
It was good.
Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
My question is, when you were
Speak into the microphone there and just get it
my
closer.
question is that, you mentioned that you were contacted by the Federal Watch Program prior to them arriving. Did they mention how many people were coming, or did they give you any specifics of how many people?
Nope, they just said that they were sending out poll watchers to observe, just like a lot of the other organizations do. So it seemed very routine, in my opinion, at that time, so.
And Just to follow up, did they show like some kind of identification or anything like that when they came?
They did. I don't know if they did inside, they did to me outside.
Anybody else?
I just want to make a comment. I understand your protection, you're probably a father, so I understand that 100%. But I also know that when people come to our house, we need to make them feel welcome. I know how to say hi in 7 different languages, but that's it. Don't ask me for conversation, you know what I mean? So he probably wanted to come out to California, where we have 45% of our population is Hispanic, you know, just kind of blend in.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah.
but it didn't feel like it. I'll just tell you that. I mean, he had a different attitude about himself, and I know a lot of Spanish, so I don't fluently speak it, but I know what he wasn't saying hello. So I know that part, so. The way he was speaking to him was, he was asking him questions about what was going on. I could tell that. But that's all I know, so I don't know what he officially asked him, but I could tell what he was,
Probably 1 or 2
Yeah.
sentences, you think, or?
probably about 5 or 6.
Anything else? Anyone else? Well, I want to thank you. Appreciate you stepping forward and filling us
My
in,
pleasure.
making
Thank you.
yourself
We
available.
appreciate all of you too.
Thank
you.
Thank you. And we're here to help if you have any questions or anything.
Thank you.
We're happy to help.
The discussion items, we have 2 of them. And they were calendared as if they were recommendations from Supervisor Ding and so I want to make it very clear that these recommendations would come from us to the Board of Supervisors, and Supervisor Ding would take them forward for consideration to the full Board of Supervisors. And so I hope you've had adequate time to look at the 2 recommendations. And what I'd like to do is first entertain a motion to adopt a recommendation, which is under number 2, under discussion items. So if I can have a motion and a second so we can discuss this recommendation. Christina?
Yeah.
You gonna make the
I'm sorry, I've called on Christina Gonzaga.
Do-
Gonzaga.
Do I make it now, or were we going to discuss it first?
You can make a
it
motion.
now? Okay, I motion to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to write a letter to President Trump to require individuals to provide documentary proof of U.S. citizenship in order to register to vote in federal elections, and prohibit states from accepting and processing an application to register to vote in a federal election unless the applicant presents documentary proof of U.S. citizenship.
Is there a second to that motion? And I'm going to relinquish the chair. And to Amy Rubio, you are now the chair. And I would like to second that motion.
I have a motion and second on the floor.
Through the chair,
Move to second.
it,
Yes.
it might be advisable to have the discussion before we approve or don't approve the recommendation. The public might have comments as well.
Well, this is the time for discussion right now. We're going to do it right now, discussion. And I hadn't envisioned the public, but I think it's so important that we probably should include the public if they have nays or pros on this particular motion. So I will now assume the chairmanship back. We have a motion on the floor. And so for discussion purposes, I'd like to hear from the members and alternates first, if there's anything they'd like to discuss on this motion.
Tony? I'd like to comment, please. I'd like to open up the discussion. I'm not comfortable with sending a letter to President Trump. As a Democrat and firm believer, I did not vote for him, and I do not feel like we should be sending him any letters. I would like to hear if Olivia has more information, because number one, I don't think that's the right way for us to go. I think there's another department that we should be sending these letters to in support of in-person, as you would ask for it to be done, which would then, the protocol. I don't want it to go and get lost at the White House. I think there's a protocol that we have to follow in order to get it through to, what you're trying to get through.
Oh, we have the authority, just to make a point of order, to recommend to the supervisors. And it doesn't necessarily mean the supervisors would approve it, but it's for us here as an entity to move forward in this area. So it's still open for discussion before I call on the general public to be able to address this issue. Anybody else on the board or alternates? Mr. Beckman?
Yeah, in regards to Patricia's concern, which she's talking to Supervisor Ding right now, but perhaps in addition to a letter to Trump, perhaps there's a letter to Congress, because they would be the ones drafting the legislation, not the White House. So maybe if it would appease Ms. Barrett, that letter would be drafted towards the Congress instead of Trump.
This would be an opportunity to amend the motion as it stands now. Would you give us an amending motion to include what you're saying to Congress?
Through the chair, just in case people haven't seen, there is a piece of legislation in the packet that is in this current Congress. So if there were someone else you wanted to address the letter to, there's a representative from Texas listed on here. Just wanted to make sure people know that this
Your
was.
point of order is that we're being repetitive? Is that
No, I
what you
just
said?
want to make sure people understand there is an actual piece of legislation on the floor of the Congress, and it's in your packet if you want to look at it.
Okay, so I would like to independently, as an organization, move something forward through the supervisor, our supervisors, to see that if they support our motion. It's not testing the waters. I know there are a lot of other things going on out there, but we're acting independent here in San Joaquin County. So what I'd like to do,
So,
Mr.
Mr.
Beckman,
Chairman,
if you would make an
I
amending
I
motion.
could amend the motion to include.
Point of order, hold on. Before you can make a motion to amend, discussion has to finish on the original motion.
Okay,
I also asked if Olivia could explain to us some of the process of this, for this letter
Well,
to.
I'd like to address that
Okay.
too.
do we have legal counsel here? Legal? No legal counsel? Well, I'm going to defer to Supervisor Ding, who is much more versed in the procedural process. And so we should probably vote as it is and after the discussion, and allow the public to be able to discuss it first before we call for the question. Then if it's necessary, then we'll make an amending motion. So with that, is there anybody on the committee that has any nay or yay? We've given
If I
Patricia a
can,
chance to
Mr.
speak.
Chairman.
Is there anybody else? Yes, Supervisor Ding?
Yeah, just really quickly. There are two letters of request here. One is to the President of the United States elect. It'll be president by the time this was voted on by the Board of Supervisors. The second is to the Governor of the State of California. Both entities have expressed publicly their opinion on the need for ID in California. The governor has very strongly and legally or legislative through executive order, or not executive order. Was that through, that was legislative process, mandated that we could not ask for ID or legal document of registration in order to vote. Trump, on the other hand, as opposed to the congressional bill you see there, the congressional bill will have to go through committee legislative processes. The board, Congress, the Senate, go back to conference committee, back to the House, back to the Senate, and then if approved, to the president. The president has also discussed passing an executive order to require voter ID in all elections. And that's why you have two letters there to the president and to the governor of the state of California. The president will, obviously, he's got the executive order authority, but he will also designate whatever department it is to carry that out. As the governor, it's pretty much making a public statement from the county that we do not approve of this, you know, rather than doing something here that would be construed as illegal. I actually thought this was a pretty tame way of saying this causes problems at our polling locations. You know, you've just heard two individuals from the public say the biggest problem they had at the polling place was people that aren't registered to vote, or they didn't have ID. So I don't really think it's really that controversial of a proposal. So that's why it was done the way it was.
Thank you, Supervisor, for your input. Now, one more time for the members, then I'm going to ask the public for their, if they wish to speak on our proposed recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Anybody else?
So for the third time, can I ask for Olivia to shed some?
Patricia, you are recognized. Now you may speak. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. For the third time, can I again ask Olivia to explain some of the protocol of this letter? Or, I don't know, the background, something. You did history.
I have no background, but I will share what I have in my ROV comments that I was going to share at that time, but I can share that now if that's desired by the chair. Do you want me to go ahead and share now?
I would like to have your official recommendations after I get public input, so I can get a sense of what the public, if they wish to speak on this issue, have to say, because that's why we're created. You know, we're representing the public at large. We have had adequate opportunity to speak here as a committee, so is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this proposed motion? Yes. Would you please, let's limit it to 2 minutes, and please line up at the podium, anyone that would like to speak. Yes, when you speak, just tell us if you're yay or nay on this proposal. Thank you. Your name?
Marcia Barton. Okay, so I was just going to, I can say yea or nay, but my comment was that I'm old, and so as far as like I've known my entire life living in California, you had to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote. So that has been historically what the criteria was to have the right to vote. So I know that there have been a lot of attempts to change that, but from individuals who may have just arrived, who have different governments, and so anyway, so I don't think it really matters. This is my point. I don't think it really matters who the president is, whether it is Biden, and I'm speaking to Patricia. I don't think it matters who the president is.
Address your comments to the board collectively, not individuals.
okay.
We won't personalize this.
Oh, okay. Well, she had just made the statement. So I don't think it really matters who's the president. I think it just matters our rights, and if we want to give that up, and what's the heart of what this is really wanting to accomplish. So
Thank you.
That's all.
Appreciate it. Please identify yourself. Next. I recognize that face.
God help you. Carla Heaney, and my vote would be yes, and I like John's idea also. I just want everybody to remember that when you go to the Secretary of State's building up in Sacramento, you have to show your ID, okay? So it's kind of hypocritical. Also, the city of Huntington Beach, the city council voted to mandate ID. Bonta, who's our attorney general, and Newsom filed suit against them, and the judge told them no. So Huntington Beach gets to mandate ID. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, Molly Watkins. So the Constitution belongs to the citizens of the United States of America. So if you are a citizen, therefore you get to vote. and impact the Constitution. If you are not a citizen, you can't vote. You shouldn't vote, and we shouldn't encourage that. And at some point, we have to draw a line in the sand. And we have to say, are you a citizen or not? Here's your ballot. And there's a story from the ROV's office, from past ROVs, not this one, that there are people that show up and want to unregister. And when I asked the person in charge at that point, why is that? Who would come and ask to be unregistered? People who have unlawfully been voting but are now going to be sworn in as a citizen. And when you're going to sworn in as a citizen, they check the rolls to see if you've been there. If you have voted and you were unlawfully voting because you were not a citizen, that is terms denies you from becoming a citizen of the United States of America. And that has happened in this building. And so we need to continue to make that happen. People that are not citizens should not vote. It's very simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Alicia Voyer, and I say yay. I was an inspector 2 years ago in Tracy during one of the primaries and the elections, and I had a gentleman come in and he was voting, and he said, so let me just say, I just need to give you a name. I could give you one of my neighbor's name, and I can give you his address, and I can vote, right? You don't even know if I'm legal or not. And I said, that's correct, sir. And he said, well, who knows how many people are going to come through here? And he said, but you don't even know who I am, legal or not legal. So that made me uncomfortable as an American who has to show my ID for many things. It's not okay. And it's being done. It's been done. And we need to do something about it as Americans. If someone can come in like that to this day, we don't know if he is or isn't a citizen of the United States. And he voted. So I vote yay.
Thank you. One thing, can you spell your last name, please?
Yes, it's Voyer.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Alicia? Anybody else? We have another?
My name's Ed Barton, and I've got two comments. One is in May, we're required to get this driver's license, the real ID, to get on planes. So you have to go into the DMV, you have to take your birth certificate, your social security, some other form that says that you are a citizen and you have a residence. So we require it there, which to me, getting on a plane is way less important than voting. It's our constitutional right to do that. And then the other thing is being involved with the election and curing ballots. This mail-out ballot has created a huge problem in California, and I want to imagine other places with all of the ballots that need to be cured because of the signatures on mail-in ballots. You have no way to verify that. In-person voting with ID and checking the rolls, to me, makes that problem go away, because as you'll hear later, there's so many ballots in California that did not get cured, that did not get dealt with, and they did not count. Voting in person deals with that situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, back to, we have a main motion. We have an amend, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Do we have anyone else after her? I know you.
Jody Graham, and I am a yay. Showing an ID is not, it has nothing to do with racism or anything like that. We really need to separate those two things, lines of thinking. You have to show an ID for a lot of things in this country. You have to show an ID to go to a store and buy Sudafed. You have to show an ID to go to a hotel. You have to show an ID to go to a UPS store to get a package. You have to show an ID at the mailbox. There's all kinds of places to show your ID to prove who you are. There's no reason not to have a voter show their ID to prove who they are. And most people want to do it. I saw it myself. We went to 15 different precincts that day. People want to prove I am who I say I am, and I want my vote to count. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I don't have to touch this. Okay. My name is Melanie Knott, and my last name is spelled Knott. I wasn't going to say anything, but I actually worked the elections also on December 5th, and in working that, I worked the poll pad, and I had a lot of people who I think I want to just share their story. A lot of them, wanted to show me their ID, and there were some who just showed me their ID. And I thought to myself, well, I can't actually take your ID, but thank you for offering it. And I just think those people's voices they need to be heard, because whether it's a nonpartisan issue. It doesn't matter. I didn't ask those people what party they belong to, or, of course, I knew their ethnicity, but at the end of the day, there were just a lot of different people who just said, we just think it's best if we show our ID. That way we protect our vote. And I just thought to myself, I need to say something, because those are people that maybe couldn't be here tonight. And I just think it's important that their voice be heard. The people of San Joaquin want to show their ID. They want to know that their vote is being protected. So, and then the last thing is that I actually heard of a story of not this particular election, where an American citizen went in to vote. An American citizen went in somewhere to vote, and they showed their ID, and they were reported, and they were arrested. That's a shame. That's a shame. That should not happen in America. Thank you.
Oh, I have a question first, and you said something that just jumped into my mind. Were you of the opinion that you could not ask for ID? Because I might have misunderstood what you said. You told them you couldn't accept their ID. Was your training was that you cannot ask for ID? Or?
So, in doing my own research, I know that I'm an American citizen, and no one should be able to stop me from showing my ID. Was that necessarily trained? I don't think it was necessarily trained, but there are a lot of people who are in the training who I think there are questions on if they can actually ask someone, and if it's okay if someone just shows them their ID, and they can do that. But I mean, there's a lot of questions. There's a cloud around that.
All right, thank you. Maybe the registrar of voters can clear this up later on, because when I actually voted, personally, I was asked for ID, and I showed ID. And so maybe the training is at variance in different polling locations. So that's why I asked her. I said, you didn't want to take her ID. She didn't have to present it, or that person. So maybe we can visit that later on, maybe. And but let me get to these motions. We have an amended motion, and I'm going to respectfully request that it be withdrawn so we can vote on the main motion with your permission.
It actually amended, I was just making a comment.
Oh, okay. I took it as an amended motion. We wrote it down because I think we had a second. So it was not an actual motion. So we're going to go to the main motion now and vote under discussion item number 2. And the polls are open. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. All right. We will now go to discussion item number 3, which is the same but different. And so for discussion purposes, the committee, all alternates and members Would you have any discussion before I entertain a motion to accept this?
No objection.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to accept number 3 and forward it to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration. Can I have a motion?
Yes.
Christina Gonzaga has the floor.
I motion to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to write a letter to Governor Newsom urging him to, 1, require voters to show a valid California identification showing they are a legal resident of California in said county, to receive a ballot and to vote any type of ballot allowed in that said election in said county, and 2, remove Article 4.5, conditional voter registration, Sections 2170 through 2173 from the California Elections Code.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Seconded?
Yep.
Okay, any discussion? If not, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We are now to item number 4. Register our voters. Here is your chance, the new year, to give us an update on the November 5th presidential general election in San Joaquin County.
Good evening, everyone. I have a presentation here that we will go over. So we'll go ahead and start. This is, I'm Olivia Hale, your San Joaquin County Registrar of Voters. Today is January 9th, and we are going to go over an update for the 24 general election. So here we have the list of voter participation breakdown. You will see that we had 83,100 voters that went to the polls on election day. That's an amazing number. I mean, we even seen it here at our office. We had a line. This room was full of voters, and there was a line wrapped around the assessor and the tax collectors area there, and we had folks were in line for a couple of hours just in our building alone. So we know that we had a huge turnout of in-person voting, which I think that can be attributed to our citizens and to all of you that are a part of this advisory committee, you know, really advocating for how San Joaquin County wants to run their elections. I think we did a marvelous job at advocating for in-person voting. So the voter turnout in total was 267,627 voters, bringing us to a little over a 70% turnout. In-person voting, we know that 48,900 people cast a ballot in person, including CVR or provisional ballots. Early voting brought in 1,933 people that actually cast a ballot here at our office prior to Election Day. Vote by mail ballot returns were 216,794 ballots. The vote by mail returns, to break them down, we had 105,194 that were sent back through the mail, 76,722 that were returned from drop boxes, 678 that were returned in person to our office upstairs, meaning they didn't put it in the drop box. They actually got out of their car, came upstairs, and handed it to us personally. And then we had 34,200 people that actually went to the polls on Election Day to drop off their vote by mail ballot. So some pretty cool information to share there, and I think we should be proud of a job well done in San Joaquin when it comes to having that in-person experience on Election Day. The drop box returns by location, so Tracy City Hall definitely took the cake for the amount of ballots that were dropped off at a drop box. In fact, on Election Day, they had people in line at the drop boxes, our staff. I was actually watching the camera on our live feed, and they had voters lined up as our staff was trying to trade out the box in the afternoon at Tracy. So they had over 11,484 ballots dropped off there. And then as we go down, the county admin building was next, then Manteca City Hall, Lodi Grape Festival, Marina Market in North Stockton, Quail Lakes Market, and also North Stockton, Ripon City Hall, Mountain House City Hall, Stockton City Hall, and on down. So all of those numbers are there for you. The election officer statistics, so we had over 560 workers work in the clerk role. We had 354 students work as student clerks. 170 inspectors worked Election Day, and then we had 159 election night workers and 53 field inspectors. In-person voting, we had 171 polling precincts, which a few of those precincts were doubled precincts where we had 2 precincts at one location. So I believe there was a total of 164 locations, but 171 precincts. The 48,900 in-person ballots that were cast, an additional 34,200 that were dropped off at the polling locations, a combined total of 83,100 voters that actually went to a polling place on election day, bringing us to over 31% of the total votes cast were done utilizing an in-person voting option during this election. Election security, all 25 drop boxes had security cameras live streaming 24/7, and they were available to the public on the ROV website. We had sheriff's escorts on election night for final pickups for all of the drop box routes. We had additional sheriff's escorts, which also provided transport. They provided escorts for transportation from all 5 receiving centers to the ROV warehouse on election night. And as good measure, the next morning when we brought the ballots from our warehouse downtown, we actually instructed our warehouse staff to not open the warehouse until the sheriff's office was present. So we had a sheriff's escort meet them there at 8 o'clock in the morning when they unlocked the warehouse. The sheriff was present as they loaded all of the materials and brought them downtown, and the sheriff brought them right to our back loading dock, and all of the materials were brought in and remained under camera from that point. Ballots were under camera surveillance at all times once they were received into our possession at the ROV suite, and we were able to keep them under camera during their opening, sorting, inspection, scanning, and tabulation. Department of Justice election observers. So I think I can add some clarity here about the DOJ. What they're looking at is there's federal laws in place for language accessibility and disability accessibility. So they were looking at those things. And so what I'm assuming is when they were speaking to the students in Spanish, it had something to do with that. But we'll talk about the ADA stuff first. So the emphasis is on ensuring ADA compliance at all polling locations, need to access all additional locations to improve ADA accessibility. So during 2025, we will be visiting all of our polling locations. We do know that a lot of the feedback we got is our locations are small, and a lot of the rooms are being given at some of these sites aren't big enough for all the equipment and to also provide that accessibility. Most of our polling locations, there was no issue, but we're definitely going to revisit that in the off season to make sure that every single polling place has the correct accessibility. Most existing locations successfully met the ADA requirements. We're going to continuously monitor and improve and make improved plans for better accessibility. One location out of all 171 precincts did not have their touch writer operational at 7 a.m. And so we corrected that as soon as we were made aware of that and got that machine up and running. Another thing that was brought to our attention was there was a blind voter that needed to vote provisional. And so providing some more training for ADA accessibility. Yes, we do disability sensitivity, and we talk about some of those things with the workers, but making sure that our poll workers are prepared to deal with assisting a voter that may have a need to that caliber. The next part is the language support. So all locations were equipped with translated materials available in multiple languages. So something that we just do as a courtesy in San Joaquin is we translate our ballots into 10 additional languages, and we provide facsimiles. The good news is sometimes it's only certain precincts, but making sure with the no wrong location that it was all available to all voters, we make sure that all 10 translated facsimile ballots are available at every single polling location throughout the county. So we got good reviews on that. There were 6 locations with Spanish speakers that the DOJ identified as not being as proficient as needed to communicate effectively with with voters that may need language assistance. Some translators struggled with providing accurate interpretations, though most performed well countywide. So I'm assuming that because of the conversation that our workers observed on election day, that's possibly what it was, as they were checking to see what kind of proficiency that the workers may have had. Sometimes because of the limited folks that can speak the additional languages that we need, sometimes a student is meeting the language component that we need to meet at a polling location. So I'm assuming maybe that's why they didn't question them being minors. I do understand that, and hearing that feedback, you know, I can see why that would be concerning, that you're talking to minors in another language. So, but I do think that that might have been the reason that they were doing that. We need to emphasize the need for proficient Spanish speakers at all polling locations and ensure all language support staff can provide clear and accurate voting instructions. So we do work with community partners in order to ensure that we have Spanish speakers available at the locations that we need to have them. But we can always do better, and we can always continue to recruit folks that do that. So if you know of people that are bilingual in English and Spanish, those are great resources for us to utilize those workers on election day to ensure we have the compliance that we need for DOJ purposes, but also by state law, it's what's required, so. All right, voter roll maintenance. So we follow the elections code. We have continuous year-round maintenance to ensure accuracy and compliance of the voter rolls. We had a citizen that reported to us voters registered at a business address. Originally, I believe it was 3,800 that were flagged. When we removed the canceled voter registrations, so voter registrations that were canceled because they were probably a commercial property, it brought it down to 800. Then when we took that number of 800 and we ran it against the current active voter roll, we still had 500 addresses remaining. We then looked up those addresses individually. We were given tax codes by this individual for those properties. We worked with the assessor's office to ensure. We think there was some confusion with the actual tax codes and what they meant that were being used, but we were able to determine that those were residential properties and that they were not commercial properties. However, I want to note that on occasion, if someone is displaced from their home and they own a business, so I'm just going to make up a story here to kind of share it. You have a doctor that now is getting a divorce that's now going to live at their practice. If they attest and they call our office and they have that conversation with us, and there's actually something in the election code that says if you have been displaced from your home, you can actually use a business address as your residence if needed, but you have to attest that that's actually where you're residing and sleeping at night. So there is small exceptions, but we're talking like a handful of voters, like probably less than 10 voters in our county. So that is something that does exist, but we did take that information in and very seriously looked at it. When we were done with our assessment, we sent it over to the sheriff's office so that they could also review that information. We also did something that I thought was interesting. We found out that there was 3 voters that were deceased, and they had been deceased for at least a year. And we were never informed, so they were still on the voter roll. And that made me ask, well, what the heck is going on? The election code says that public health is supposed to get that information to us within 30 days. Now what the state's doing is they're having our local entity report that information to the state, and then the state tells us, and then I got to thinking, well, that person at public health is my colleague. Why can't I just reach out and ask for the death record and get that information expedited so that we could make sure that it's accurate and correct? There's no law preventing it. I'm able to get that information from the authorized authority, which would be public health. So we actually were able to work locally with our public health to request the death records for the past 5 years. And so my analyst team is going to take that list that we have for the last 5 years, and we're going to compare it to the voter roll this month. And if we find anything, we will be able to do the appropriate adjustments because that information came from the authorized agent of public health. So we're doing all we can, looking at creative ways that we can still comply with the law and do a proactive approach to keeping our voter rolls maintained. So this is part of the due diligence and anything that comes up. And again, as I've stated in the past, if you have information that we may not have access to or that we can't do anything with, maybe I can get that information and then seek from the correct authority so that we are in compliance and we can make adjustments and continue to clean our voter rolls, which maintaining voter rolls is a never-ending job, and will continue to be that way. Just coming out of the election, we had over 14,000 updates or new registrations that we had to apply after Election Day, and so it's a forever process is how I would put it out there. And if there's ever questions about the voter rolls or what we do, we're happy to bring you in. Even in the off season, remember our office is still open to the public. And if you ever have questions about our processes, even when it's not election day and canvas mode, you're welcome to come in and we're happy to share that information with you. Going on to the provisional CVR envelope update. So I think we can all in this room, regardless of what beliefs we may have, agree that the same-day registration is a very difficult process. It is very difficult for the poll workers to manage on election day. It's very time-consuming for us as an office to process post-election. So I can share with you that we spent more time on the 9,000 conditional voter registrations that we received than we did on the 120,000 additional vote-by-mail ballots that we had after Election Day. Processing those took about a week, but processing the same-day registrations took us about 13 days, I think, total. So there are some things now, in my ROV comments, I'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, but if we live with the rules that we have in place right now and the legislature doesn't change anything going into 2026, our goal is to create a carbon copy on the envelope. So instead of the poll worker having to figure out which form needs to go for which voter, basically if the voter's there and they're not in the poll pad and they're not just a traditional voter that's sign the poll pad, get your ballot, vote, and move on. If it is a CVR provisional situation, or they're a brand new voter, they're an updated voter, they're a voter that's requesting to be canceled, or they're a voter that's there that wants to cure their vote by mail ballot because they've received that notice. That form on that envelope will be used for everything so that when it gets back to our office, we're able to pull the carbon copy off, and because we need the form to scan, whether it's an update, an affidavit, or so on, it'll make it much more streamlined so that the workers will be able to have less confusion, if you will. So we are looking at that CVR provisional envelope. In all truth, if there's some changes to the laws, that would be wonderful, but if there's not, we will prepare a way to mitigate it to make it more efficient to the best of our ability. And that is it on my presentation and update. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Anybody from the committee?
Olivia, I previously had asked you a question about attempts at somebody to present a ballot twice or duplicate ballots. You indicated there were 58 of those that were turned over to the sheriff's office.
Yes.
Will you have the ability to report back to us what happened with each of those 58?
As soon as the sheriff gives me the green light, I will be happy to do so. I will tell you, though, that once I send information to them and they launch an investigation, they usually don't share much with me until it's resolved, and that can take some time. So I will tell you that we caught all of those people. They got one ballot counted, and the one that didn't count went in a nice little banker's box, and we turned that over as evidence to the sheriff's office. So
Excellent, thank you.
Anybody else?
I
Yes,
just-
Patricia?
Thank you. I just want to say that I was truly impressed on my election night ran. I sat outside with your crew. It was very impressive. There was I think 1 or 2 pieces of equipment didn't get returned. A door got locked, so I don't know what happened after that, but I was impressed with that. I was impressed when I walked through your office and how everything has been not downsized, but more compact and more efficient in the equipment that you have. And I like the way you're sitting up there saying already how we can improve next election with the carbon copy thingamajigger, Pretty impressed with your office.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question, if everyone's done. How did DOJ make a determination that there was inadequate language proficiency to aid voters? I'm just kind of wondering if you have a kind of a benchmark or a measurement tool that they use to decide that?
To be honest, and I know that I'm free to do that, is I really don't know what benchmark they used. And even when Eric and I got the phone calls, our first question was, well, are you going to give us an official report of your findings? And they're like, there won't be anything issued in writing. And that was just interesting to us. So basically, from what they told us, they visited 50 of our 171 locations. And of those 50 locations, I guess they decided to speak to the students and find out if they could speak Spanish appropriately or not, sorry. So that is the only information we received, and we did that phone call and a conference call, so Eric can also attest that that's what they shared with us on that phone call, so.
That's very interesting, nothing in writing, so. We will move on unless someone has some other questions. Yes,
I do have a comment in regards to the language support.
your,
When
your sign fell down, so identify
I-
yourself.
Oh, Shirley, District 2, sorry about that. In regards to the language support, when the time comes, or will you share with us what steps we would be taking in order to provide more Spanish-speaking people in each poll location?
Yeah, so we're actually required to do that before so what happens is we actually release a report of all of the languages spoken at all polling places about 14 days before the election. But if somebody drops out, we've shown that we've made our efforts, but we're always happy to have bilingual workers on standby just in case we get those. And it's just continuing. I mean, our recruitment efforts are always ongoing. What I will share is because we put the election officer interest card on the back of the voter information guide, I've never seen us get that many interest cards back ever. When I walked through precinct operations about 4 days after the election, their entire countertop was filled with different stacks from all the different cities and areas throughout the county. And so it looks like our recruitment efforts are starting to go well. We've also had a lot of great active participation. One thing I want to note is folks that may have shared concerns about the elections have all stood up and said, hey, where can I help? Can I observe? Can I work? What do you need from me? Do you need me to go here to help? And so we've had a lot of support in that way. So I think that from what the DOJ was saying, what I was understanding is maybe people said, hey, I can speak Spanish because they're wearing the name tag, but maybe they weren't fully proficient. And that's what the feedback was, is just ensuring that people are fully proficient. And so at this time, the proficiency is they say that they can speak Spanish. And so we're not like giving them a test or anything like we do for county workers that receive bilingual pay. So we will continue to look into ways that we might be able to do that to ensure compliance. And I will always update you all in every meeting that we have if we have any further information on that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
I was curious, on this election, was there more same-day registration than you've had in past elections?
Absolutely.
And how many did you have this year, did you say?
So to put it into context, in 2020, that general election, we had, because you could go to the wrong location, we actually had 30,000 provisional and CVRs, but most of them were actually provisional because they were at the wrong location. I think there was less than a couple thousand that were actually true. I think it was 3,500 conditional voter registrations. This election, we had 9,000 same-day registrations. So it was quite a lot, and to put it in comparison, Fresno County has more voters than we do, and they reported having 7,000, and we had 9,000. So, I mean, we had quite a bit. It was quite interesting how many we had. In fact, I think I remember Supervisor Ding and we did a walkthrough the next day, and we were like, what the heck is this? And so we actually did an exercise where once we entered the voters in, so there's 2 steps with a conditional voter registration. First, we have to enter all the affidavits into the system so that they can be verified. Once we did that, we ran that file, we sent it to the sheriff's office, and we had them just kind of do an assessment to make sure there was nothing like 50 voters for one address or something like that. And the board actually asked me to ensure that the sheriff got a chance to take a look, and we even had our analysts take a look at it just to make sure we didn't see any more than maybe 2 people, maybe 3 from an address on occasion. And so there was nothing that was concerning. One thing that the captain did come back and share with me is he noticed people don't include the birthplace. And so in California, you're not required to provide your birthplace, only your birth date. So that was the one thing that he brought up, but it wasn't something that would have stopped us from processing those. But it was an astronomical amount of registrations to be entered. And people know that the election's coming. I just couldn't believe that people waited until the day of to register to vote. So, yeah.
And by California law, you have to allow them to register on the day.
Yes, ma'am.
That's absurd.
Anyone else? Okay, I want to thank you. Patricia, I didn't see your hand. Patricia?
Can you tell which district most of them registered out of?
We actually looked at that, and it's all over the entire county. We looked at that information, and there was no way to say, oh, they all came from a particular district or area. It was countywide.
Are one of the questions, like, how long have you lived here? Because are they new residents, or are we growing?
They are only required to share their name, their residential address, their birth date, the last four of the social, and a driver's license number if they have it.
Thank you, appreciate it, and I know you're having other registrar voters' comments later on, but we're gonna move to the public comment section of our agenda. Is there anyone wishes to speak from the public? You're first in line.
Okay, I have 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, listen, would you tell us your name first? And usually it's 3 minutes, but you know what? We're
I called-
moving pretty good, so.
I called
and
the
I don't
count-
see a big line here, so.
I called twice, and they did say 5 minutes. So-
Oh, good, I don't know. All
so
right,
I got it down to 4:30. How's that? Okay.
go.
My name is Marcia Barton, and one thing I didn't hear anything about was uncured ballots. Uncured ballots are uncounted ballots. When citizens voted in person, there was zero need to cure ballots. Now that California sends mail-in ballots to every registered voter, in addition to in-person voting, it has created an election accounting management nightmare. What was the result of the multitude of mail-in ballots? Over 100,000 ballots were designated to need curing, a massive undertaking. I worked with a team that completed the curing of ballots for 2 cities. I'm keenly aware of the personal commitment and perseverance. Oh, did I push my button? No, okay. I'm keenly aware of the personal commitment and perseverance it takes to help resolve the ballot issue on behalf of the voter, who statistically 90% of the time was fully unaware that their submitted ballot was in jeopardy of not being counted because they were not notified. A problem that in-person voting, is this going in and out? Oh, I'm too close. I'm sorry. Sorry, everybody. Hope I get 15 seconds back. Okay, so the voters who statistically 90% of the time was fully unaware, okay, because they were not notified. A problem that in-person voting would not have created. And you might like that, Olivia. I reported at the county supervisor meeting on December 3rd that the Secretary of State recorded 96,530 ballots statewide were left uncured, thus uncounted, on December the 2nd at 9:15 a.m. The shock of that number to me was that those voters were completely unaware that their vote wasn't counted. Yet, what was even further astounding, after my reporting of that information to the Board of Supervisors on the 3rd, was to find on December 5th on the Secretary of State's website that the statewide uncured ballots had been changed to record only 26,918. Where did 70,000 uncured ballots disappear to? The Secretary of State's website posted a running spreadsheet. The running totals were affected by documented input. It is an impossibility to start with over 130,000 uncured ballots, have them reduce to 96,000 uncured ballots gradually over a month's time, to then reduce it without any accounting 2 days later by 70,000. While the cumulative total number of processed ballots does not show a corresponding increase of 70,000. Because I personally worked curing ballots, I know firsthand the time it entails to cure even a single ballot. To have cured 70,000 ballots in so short a time is infeasible. Alameda County, at the end of vote counting on December 2nd, had 4,800 uncured ballots. Yet suddenly on December 5th, it was wiped to say 0. In like manner, San Joaquin County, at the end of counting, went from 27 uncured ballots on December 2nd to 0 on December 5th, wiped clean. Additionally, all the following were wiped to 0. Stanislaus, 1,945. Orange County, 11,560. San Diego, 8,000. San Bernardino, 8,300. Riverside, 8,300. And Fresno, 4,100, all to 0. The Secretary of State's counting spreadsheet would not pass the scrutiny of any audit. Sorry, I'm nervous. But wiping uncured ballots to 0 did not happen uniformly across all counties. Of 59 counties statewide, 26 did not change. Why were only some counties wiped clear? Could it be only the counties that the uncured, uncounted ballots would have made a difference in the outcome of the election? Every voter whose ballot we helped cure, when they learned through us that there was a problem with their ballot, responded saying, "But I signed my ballot the way I always have signed." Newsom's AB 37 stated it would enfranchise more voters and bolster election integrity and transparency. It did not. Where did the 70,000 voters' ballots go? Determining that ballots were uncountable, not notifying the voter of that information, and then wiping them from the record was not an achievement of a successful election. Thank you.
Thank you. You raised a lot of questions, but we'll reserve it for the members to ask later on. Yes, Jody?
Hi, Jody Graham again. There were a couple of things in the presentation that I wanted to point out. And that was a sentence, how San Joaquin County wants to run its elections. And as I understand, this board voted against the Voters' Choice Act. And the county supervisors did that, and we rejected that. I also want to bring up the sentence, no wrong location, to make sure that everybody understands what that means. It means that you could go to any precinct and vote. That is a hallmark of the VCA. The only part of a VCA that we do not have in this county is extended pre-election day voting, early voting, which in a true VCA runs, I think, 2 weeks before election day. That is the only part that this county doesn't have. So although this board voted against the Voters' Choice Act, we now have 3 of the 4 hallmarks of a Voters' Choice Act county. So I want to make sure that that is understood. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the 35,000 voters that took their ballots into the precinct on election day. Having been to 15 different precincts on election day, most people did not realize that they could open that envelope themselves and put it through the scanner. That needs to be a part of the training because those ballots should not have had to go through the signature verification process at the ROV office or run the risk of ending up being an uncured ballot. They could have fed it through the machine themselves, which would have cut out probably 7 or 8 steps at the ROV office. I don't think that that was trained enough to the staff to tell them to please put the ballot through the scanner themselves. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, public?
Mr. Chairman, when you get a chance, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, Supervisor Ding?
We got
Oh,
one
I'm
more
sorry,
public.
Supervisor, public has one more, then we'll.
Hello, Joni Shoemaker. I was very, I don't know if I want to say cursed or blessed, but to be allowed to help with the curing of ballots for this election, and it was quite eye-opening. And one in particular voter I came across in doing the ballot curing was blind, and he actually had witnesses for his signature, and yet he showed up on the ballot cure list. So I don't know how that can be fixed at all, but there's a problem and it really needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Ding?
Thank you. That's it for public comments? Okay. I want to, sometimes history gets rewritten, and I kind of want to go back to the beginning. I want to congratulate everybody at this table and remind you that when we first got here, one of the things that, there were two things that I remember. It's amazing because I don't even remember yesterday, but you wanted to increase in-person voting at the polling place, and that was your pressure put on this Board of Supervisors and the Register of Voters, and that increased dramatically from where it was going. This VCA thing is starting to bother me, because I've heard it 3 or 4 times, and I want to explain this. When we started this conversation 1.5 years ago, the number one concern, if you remember back then, was that Zuckerberg, or one of those guys that maybe could probably help me figure out how to use my phone, was you guys didn't want any of the computers hooked up to the internet. And rightfully so, I understand that. A full VCA, Voters' Choice Act, would have all those computers hooked up to the internet so that you could vote at any precinct in the county. And the reason I bring that up, because I've also heard criticism that people went and they voted in Tracy, but they're from Lodi, and they went to Tracy to vote, and they couldn't vote in their local elections. Or that, my supporters went to, Lockford, and they had to vote there, but, they're from Stockton, and they couldn't vote in their city council races, and they didn't have ballots for them. Well, no, they couldn't, because this committee and the Board of Supervisors was adamant that these computers were not gonna be hooked up to the internet. So that's why that happened. We did that. So you can't have it, both ways. So what VCA, all of them been hooked up to the internet. You go to any polling place in the county. Here's the benefit of it. You could have went to any polling place in the county and voted in any election you wanted to. You say, I'm from Stockton, here's your Stockton ballot. We weighed on the other side for security and said, we didn't want that. We wanted the computers unplugged so that there was a chip in the computer that had to go out for safeguard reasons. So anyway, it wasn't just one thing different from the VCA. The number one thing was these things were not connected to the internet. So some positives and negatives. I just really want to commend you guys and the elections office. We were pretty damn hard on you. And I know, I wanted this done right, and I wanted the security done right, and I think you delivered. Most of the reasons I'm still upset has nothing to do with the county. It has to do with the state mandates and things we need to work on. But considering, we were Delta Publishers clearinghouse election to deal with, the same day registration, bus them in, let them register, whatever. There's nothing we as a county can do about that, because that was state law. Now we have to advocate to the state and to the federal government what it is we want. And I thank you for your actions tonight, so that we as a board, hopefully I'm gonna advocate that we take that position on your behalf. Thank you.
Well, we collectively thank you for your leadership in this area. And I want to make a note of that. I think we've had full cooperation and support from you. So, well, I take that back. Not full, but we had much cooperation from you, Supervisor Ding. With that, if there's no questions of the supervisor, I don't want to make him a target, we'll move to the Registrar of Voters' comments.
All right, Thank you very much. So we're gonna start with consent item 1 that's in your packet. We will utilize the data from the election officer survey to enhance the election officer training program. We had some observers and even members of the grand jury attend the training this year, and we received positive feedback. This program is ever-changing, as are the election laws in the great state of California. This survey was implemented in the 2024 primary and has helped us to produce a better product, as it will for the 2026 cycle. Our office is actually working towards creating one of our goals to be able to increase the participation in that election officer survey. We're hoping to at least get 30% participation from our workers for future elections. So we are taking that very seriously. We think getting the metrics from our actual workers on what's going on helps us to improve our program, as we will continue to do for 2026. In relation to discussion item number 1, I had some notes. Thank you so much for coming and presenting and sharing your experience. I think the real life experience of our workers, we commend you and thank all of you that participated. Please always reach out. Constructive criticism is a good thing, and we're thankful to have that, and we like hearing the good things too, so thank you for sharing. It was good to hear that you guys had such a great team and you had a good experience with the workers on Election Day. Just to add a couple of the things that you talked about, one was we talked about new voters that have never voted before. You were able to find them in the poll pad. So I'm thinking that they didn't know that they had registered prior. And then also, whenever a person goes to DMV, if they don't check the box saying do not update my voter registration, it will register them to vote. And so the motor voter program is, I wouldn't say a wonderful thing, but it's something that our office has to deal with every single day, and we get those DMV updates on a very regular basis. So I'm wondering if maybe that was the disconnect on that, because they should not have been in the poll pad if they've never been registered before. Some sort of way they've been registered or forwarded to our office from DMV for registration at some point. So I think that's where that information's coming from on that. Additionally, you said a system to validate the provisional voter and a system to validate new voters. So what happens when you fill out that envelope and their ballot is placed inside the envelope and then their form is on the outside? When it comes back to our office, the very first thing we do is we take the form and we process that. And then once we've processed it and confirmed and validated and given the voter history, then we're able to open up that envelope and actually count the ballot that's inside. So it doesn't happen with the poll workers at the location, but the validation happens at our office, and we have a very strict chain of custody. So the ROV staff works in large volumes of staffing. We bring in temporary and our permanent staff, and we actually process all of those one by one. So the voter does get history. So it's post-election, so if you've noticed on that envelope, there's a stub that can be torn off, and so the voter can take that stub home with them, and then after Election Day, they can actually call into our office, give us their tracking number, and we can tell them that their ballot was counted or partially, whatever the situation was, we can give them that information. So just something to add there. And then I think, the scanner. So one thing about the scanners is there's actually a summary report at the end of the night that you all print out. That summary report during our canvas post-election, that report is gonna match what is in that box. And so that tape comes out and it tells us exactly how many ballots should be in that box, and it has to match. And if it doesn't, then we would do a reconciliation process. And so something that we've seen, we only had to do it to, I think, 4 locations, is when it came back and the tape, they didn't print the tape or something, what we did is that we quarantined that device. We did not pull the V drive out of that device. We took those paper ballots, we scanned them on our central scanner, on our emergency scans at the warehouse, and we created a new thumb drive, and we quarantined that old one, and that's what we used for uploading the results so that we would know that they were exact and accurate. So there's a lot that does go into that to ensure that. I think for the workers, you want to be able to see that yourselves to verify that. And so did you guys get to, I don't know, I didn't get to ask you, but we also have the binder that's at all of the precincts, and there's some really good information in there that provides a little more insight, like the seals that are on all the machines so that you guys will sign off and verify your seals and all of those things. And so there is a lot there. I think that there's more and more information that our workers need to retain for Election Day. And so we do 1 day of training, and then they have the online videos. And our disconnect is, how do we get these 1,500 people trained and ready to go and give them every piece of information? And I mean, in all fairness, it's almost ridiculous. You're given this giant binder with all this information inside, and we want you to retain this and know what to do on Election Day. And so we will continue to make improvements through your feedback to know how we can improve that training, how we can provide the resources, what can we do for our workers. So that's like an ever changing, or a forever going battle, but something that we continue to try to strive for greatness with. So we were happy to hear in most of our training team, when they read, there were several comments from workers that said this was the best training they'd seen in years. They were very happy. I mean, of course, there's always going to be criticism, but they felt that this was much better this time. I mean, everything always needs improvement, but we definitely made some strides towards improving what we had for the 2024 general. So thank you so much for sharing your information tonight and allowing me to kind of give some feedback on that. Discussion item 2 and 3. For discussion item 2, I said, I believe this would help build public trust. Whether the concerns are real or perceived is not the argument. We want our residents to believe in our process. As an election official, it is my duty to uphold all of the laws as it relates to our elections. This doesn't mean as election officials, we always agree with what is law. Working through the legislature is the best way to voice our concerns. The California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, for all 58 counties represented in California, they hold legislative committees every month that I do attend to try to keep myself in the crowd of knowing what's going on. But there's a small group of us that are polling place counties, and we're getting together and pushing back because the legislature's pushing this Voters' Choice Act and all of this stuff on us. And those few counties that are kind of bigger counties like San Joaquin and Contra Costa, and then we have Solano County, we want the laws to reflect what we do in polling place counties and not so much vote center counties. And that's where we feel like the same day registration, it's easier to process those if you're a vote center county. And we feel that our term is they're making the laws very vote center centric, and they're making it hard. So we want to continue to advocate and rally around traditional polling place and supporting that. And so through that and through this advisory committee, I'm definitely on the same team as all of you to continue to strive towards what's best for San Joaquin. So I just wanted to put that out there. For discussion item 3, ID requirements do come from the HAVA Act of 2002 as well. It might be helpful to write federal representatives as well on both topics. The conditional voter registration removal, I'm going to be very frank with this one. The conditional voter registration removal would reduce the cost of our elections and prevent confusion. I spent 2 weeks of labor and overtime with my staff, and the Thanksgiving break, we only took Thursday off, so we had to work to process those. So I know that elections in California, we are the second most expensive state in the country when it comes to the cost of our elections. And we want to find places where we can reasonably reduce those costs if possible. And this is something that I think would do that. I think it would also help to prevent the confusion around who can vote and allow us to certify our elections faster in California if the legislature doesn't pull the move that they did on us when they required us to wait the 28 days before we could certify like they did for November. I did learn that law is only applicable for the November 2024 election and is not in place for the future elections as of today. Yet, right? So just wanted to share that with you. And then both items 2 and 3 are challenged by large groups with concerns around voter access. And that has a lot to do with why the laws were created in the first place. In my professional opinion, we can achieve this through voter education and outreach throughout the year and not just during election season. And I think that's the valuable takeaway. This Board of Supervisors has allowed the Registrar of Voters Department to develop an outreach unit, and so we have had that unit now for 2 years, and we're beginning to really be able to make a difference in the community through the voter education and outreach piece, and we'll continue to build on that. Some notes from the comments I heard tonight. In training, we tell them not to ask for ID because the law says that we can't, but if a voter insists on giving their ID, we would like to see the poll worker just take the ID. And, we don't want to tell the voter, we want the voter to have a good experience. when we're sitting there with the voter, the lawmakers and all that stuff, we want to make sure the voters having a good experience. And so if they feel inclined to provide their ID, we instructed the workers to, you can look at it and give it back to them. You don't have to say, I can't look at that, but you also aren't supposed to ask for it. But I know, because even Mr. Bronco shared with me when he went to his polling place, they ask for ID. And so I do know that some workers, they ask. And I mean, even if we tell them that we're not supposed to ask, and they ask, and at the end of the day, if you think that that's right and you've been employed to work and we told you not to do that and you do it, I mean, we can't be at every single location. And I'm not against voter ID at all. I think it would make it easier for our office to process things. I mean, when we look at the bigger scope, that's definitely helpful for us. Let's see, our unprocessed report was reflecting almost 6,000 challenge ballots, which are the ones that needed to be cured. And when we were done, we had 1,700 remaining. And so to what you shared with us, ma'am, was that they all disappeared. So on our unprocessed report, it zeroed out, but we had 1,700 ballots that never were cured, that were boxed and sealed away with the election. So I'm curious to know why the Secretary of State was reflecting that we had 0, because when we finished our election, we still had 1,700 of those 6,000 that didn't get cured. So I want to look into that a little more. So if it's okay, I'd like to get a little more information about that after the meeting, if possible. The next thing was we will advertise to voters. Placer County does something that they call sign, scan, and go. You can vote at home and then come to your polling place and sign, scan, and go. Basically, because the vote-by-mail ballot can be scanned as your in-person ballot now, we have to send them the vote-by-mail ballot. They can vote it at home, they come to their polling place on election day, they sign the poll pad, they scan their vote-by-mail ballot, and they're out of there, and it's quick. And so that law was implemented less than 60 days before the primary election, which meant that we didn't get to put it in our poll worker training. We told the poll workers in an email, like, hey, this is some new legislation, and you guys can implement this. And then for the November election, we made sure we trained it to the poll workers. And so now, when a new law is established in 2026, we will make sure that we're advertising to the voters that they are able to go to their polling place and use that ballot to vote right then and there by signing the poll pad, scanning their vote-by-mail ballot, and then they get to go on their way. Which we can talk about more. We got some time, but that's something that's the ideas flowing in our office right now in reference to that. The thing I heard about the blind voter that had a witness signature on the envelope, we received new technology, and prior to the sorters that we currently are using, the prior years, it only captured the signature box. Now we're capturing the entire envelope, and so I'm guessing that there may have been a training issue with some staff to know that now you pull up the whole image of the envelope and you can see the witness box, the authorized agent box, and the voter signature box, which is new. So the 2024 general was the first time we had that capability. So taking note of that will ensure that we're upgrading some of our training materials to make sure that our staff that are checking those signatures know to look at that image. And then from there, I have a few legislative bill updates. So we are already getting stuff from the legislature before the session even started. So just a few things to share, and a lot of this is related to what we've talked about tonight. And I think some of the letters that were proposed to be written today will support some of these things. So we have AB 5 as introduced by Berman. Tallying and release of election results. Existing law requires election officials to commence the canvass for an election no later than Thursday following the election and to make the canvass open to the public. Existing law requires the canvass to be continued daily. Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays are accepted for not less than 6 hours each day until completed. This bill would state that the intent of the legislature to enact legislation that assists counties in the prompt tallying and release of election results. There's also SB 3 as introduced by Cervantes. It's exactly the same wording with what I just read, and it says this bill would express the intent of the legislature to enact legislation to revise the process of reporting election results by county election officials and to make modifications to the canvass of the vote. So the goal, from what I understand, of these two different pieces of these two bills is to decrease the amount of time it takes us to certify an election. 28 days is too long. along, is how we're understanding it. These are just placeholder bills for now, but I just wanted to share that those are out there and some things that you can get more information about if you'd like. AB 16 is introduced, Alanis. Vote by mail ballot processing. Existing law authorizes a jurisdiction to begin processing vote by mail ballot return envelopes, and if the jurisdiction has the necessary computer capability, vote by mail ballots 29 days before an election. This bill would instead require election officials to begin processing vote by mail ballot return envelopes and vote by mail ballots on the date on which the ballots are mailed. So whatever we get in, it has to be processed that day, I guess is what the idea is. There's more to come on this. These are just early stages of these bills, but I just wanted to share with this committee so you knew what was out there. And then AB 17, also introduced by Alanis. This is precinct maps. Basically, when precinct boundaries change, they want maps to be available to the public. Well, we already do that. We do that as a courtesy. So if a member of the public reaches out to us and asks for a precinct map, we provide it now. So this would change nothing for San Joaquin County. It's something we were already doing. AB 25, as introduced de Mayo, California Voter ID and Election Integrity Act of 2025, and I think this might be something that Supervisor Ding was referring to. Under the California Constitution, a person may vote if the person is a United States citizen, 18 years of age, and a resident in the state. Existing law prohibits a local government from enacting or enforcing any charter provision, ordinance, or regulation requiring a person to present identification for the purpose of voting. This bill would express the intent of the legislature to enact legislation to improve the integrity of state and local elections by requiring a government-issued ID to vote, verifying the citizenship of voters, maintaining accurate voter roll lists, incentivizing timely counting of ballots, and enhancing the signature review process. So it's starting to sound like things are getting into alignment about voter ID being presented. So that's just something I wanted to share. And then the last one is AB 72, as introduced by Jackson. I wanted to share this one, but it's really taking another language, existing federal law, including the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, requires the Secretary of State and county election officials to provide language assistance to voters in order to access voting information, register to vote, and cast their votes at the polling place. Existing law requires the county election official to provide a facsimile copy of the ballot with the ballot measures and ballot instructions printed in languages other than English if the Secretary of State has determined that doing so is appropriate as specified. This bill would require elections officials to provide a voter with registration or voting notices, forms, instructions, assistance, or other materials or information relating to the electoral process, including ballots, in Bengali if the voter requests it. By increasing the duties on election officials, this would be a state-imposed mandated local program. That's all I have on the legislative bills, and if anyone wants more information on those, I'm happy to share. I wanted to share our upcoming board items on January 14th. This will be a consent item. We have an appointment of a quorum for Reclamation District 2126. We were notified by the district secretary that all members of that particular reclamation district had resigned, and so they have requested a quorum, which requires at least 2 people to be present on that board so they can then appoint their third person. So that item is coming on January 14th. And then the date is to be determined, but the election billing analysis that we went through with the election center as the chosen vendor, we will be taking that item to the board in the next couple of months to present it to the board so they can make a decision on what way they want to go and if they want to adopt the recommendation. And please keep an eye out. That'll be going to the board in the next few meetings, sometime probably in February. And then just one last thing, I'm happy to report out at the next meeting if this committee so desires. We did receive our new law book for 2024 of all the new things that are happening. And if we would like more details about what we're implementing going into the 2025-26 cycle, I would want to possibly bring an update if the board wishes. So that's all I have on my notes. Thank you for your time.
Wow, thank you so much. It's a lot of work. Any questions from the committee? Anyone?
I do. Chair?
Yes, Christian and then
With regards,
Patricia.
how you doing? With regards to the survey responses, because I do recall taking that survey online, okay, and I do recall these questions too. Let's focus on number 12, the very last one, right?
1 second.
I'll read it to you. Did you encounter challenges on election day that were not adequately addressed in the training? So when I look at the the pie charts and based on the number of responses from the people that took that survey, right? The preceding, like the ones prior, everyone pretty much went with the program. They all agreed, said everything was adequately, that the training that they got was adequate, okay? But when I looked at over here, right, I noticed that overwhelmingly, okay, so 102, the count was 102, so 47.22% said no, but the ones that disagreed, 92 said yes. So what were those challenges
So we,
specifically that you know of?
so the challenges, if you turn to the very last page.
I know I read that, but
yeah.
go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so some of the things that were shared with us that more robust training for hands-on training when it came to machines and provisional ballots. The same-day registration ballots came up time and time again as being challenged, and they just weren't prepared for the amount that they had to do. I mean, we sent out enough for 100 for every single location, and some locations had even more than 100 people show up to do a same-day registration. It was utterly insane, so that was one of them. They felt that with the online and in-person instructions that we could have did a little bit better job aligning those. So maybe they encountered things on election day that it felt like they had varying answers to. They felt that like the training was addressed to everybody, and they felt that like inspectors and field inspectors could have been better prepared for some of the challenges, like inserting a toner cartridge. So that was something that came up quite a bit, to where they felt that if the field inspector had special training, that would have made it better, and so that was something. So I'm thinking it's basically that, and so on the comments we summarize those, and we're looking at those details. So I'm guessing a lot of it was related to the items on the last page.
So hardware issues related to the machines. See, I like to.
Same-day registration.
I like to, I recall, okay, I was an inspector. That was my first go-around as an inspector, because in the chain of command, an inspector's like a supervisor on site. And then all my other, the poll workers, those are my employees. Those are my crew. I'm like the lead, okay, in the chain of command, right? Okay, because when I had a question, there was a problem, they pointed, that's my inspector. Right? Okay. So the bottom line is, the problems that I encountered that day were like, people claimed that they already registered. They showed us proof on their smartphones, confirmation. They get a confirmation number that they registered with the SOS, Secretary of State. But when we came to find them in the poll pad, they weren't there. Those were the specific challenges that we incurred that day. It's really befuddling that I didn't see any of that. This is more like, it takes so much time to set up. I mean, if that's your first go around working an election, then that's a given, okay? But I mean, if you've done multiple of them, then you know it's gonna take time. That's why you guys recommend that we come here, we get there earlier, at least 1 hour before start time, right? So I'm looking for something more like along those lines, what I just delineated to you, like, people coming in and they claim that they're registered, but we couldn't find them in the system, like that.
Absolutely, and so that relates to the 15-day close of registration and links back to the same-day registration. So the Secretary of State has mandated that we have to do same-day registration, but then they call it this 15-day close before the election, but they're still accepting online registrations and issuing confirmation numbers to people. And so we don't get to see those until after Election Day. And that's another one of the huge disconnects around the same-day registration, is after that 15-day close, people can still access the online registration through the Secretary of State. They're registering, they're getting a confirmation number, but they're not going to show up on our poll pad because we're on a 15-day close and we're not even allowed to bring those registrations down. So I think that and we have more details of the comments. We just didn't want to overwhelm them, so we tried to summarize for you, and so we're happy to share more details on that if that's helpful.
If he wants to follow up, he can.
Yeah, just give me a call. Just give me a call.
Let's take Patricia's question, and then we're gonna move on.
Where is District 21, District 26?
Where what? 2126, yeah.
Where?
I don't know which, it's over there somewhere. Sorry.
You said down there, so you said over there.
No, it's most of the reclamation districts reside in the west side of the county, the Delta area. I don't know exactly where that one is. reclamation districts are like landowners, so we don't ever actually do their elections, but our Board of Supervisors is the authority to appoint and to accept the people that they want to put on the board, so that's what that is. I can give you more information on that too, call me tomorrow, and I'm happy to tell you exactly where it is. Okay, perfect.
All right, moving forward, if there's no more questions, thank you. It's a lot of information. I know this bill analysis of this proposed legislation can get pretty heady sometimes, but thank you. Our next item is committee comments, if there's any committee comments. If there are none, schedule the next meeting, and I have to first from Supervisor Ding, how many are we allowed during fiscal year 2025? Or do we, before we set a meeting, there might be some things that we want to talk about later on that we can't discuss in detail here, and we can have a meeting, but before we set a meeting, how many, does anybody know how many?
Yeah, through the chair, because there's not a general election or primary, it's monthly for this year.
For this year?
If you would like, yes.
Then, unless there's an objection, things come up.
Mr. Chairman, just a question, because we also, I really respect people that step up to volunteer for these meetings. And it really is a sacrifice, and I know there's other places you'd like to be. So, what I guess what I'm getting, if we don't see anything, I mean, we could still talk amongst ourselves, instead of having an official meeting every month for the next 6 months, you know. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, is maybe you don't need a meeting for a couple of months, and so that you can, something gets developed, because I don't really know what's gonna develop legislatively or anything else for the next couple of months.
Unless there's objection from the committee, I would propose that we have our next meeting in March. And that, at that time, we can reassess whether we need a monthly meeting if there's an issue that comes up that requires us to meet. And we've been looking at, on the calendar, we have, this is the second Thursday. So the second Thursday of February, March, is the 13th. Unless there's an objection, I'll deem it a consensus. We will meet on February 13th for our next meeting. March, I'm sorry. March is what I meant. You have to read my mind, which is hard to do. So if there's no objection, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
I'm entertaining. You have to make it.
Oh, I'm making a motion to leave.
Is there a second on the motion to adjourn?
Say second. I'll second.
All right, made and seconded. No opposition. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much.